what I love is being able to talk to somebody, see what their pain is, and give them an idea of what I could do to alleviate that pain, and that be enough for us to move forward together.
Welcome to the Fractional Edge podcast, the ultimate podcast where we unlock the power of workforce planning and discuss the rapidly growing fractional executive staffing strategies to supercharge your business.
Meet your hosts, Carol Fraser, a workforce planning expert, fractional chief human resources officer, and founder of C4 Talent.
And Jason Hewitt, the sensei of marketing, fractional chief marketing officer, and founder of Fifth Degree Marketing.
We'll bring you insights from seasoned pros, inspiring success stories, and actionable strategies to optimize your valued workforce.
Don't miss this chance to upgrade your business with top industry leaders in today's competitive landscape. So tune in and learn how to unleash your competitive edge. I would like to ask, what are like your top 3 pieces of advice for our listenership as a fractional creative director?
I think the first thing is sort of figure out, you talked about your, how do you call it? What is the language you use around your areas of magic or your areas of genius? Do you have a preference of how you talk about that, Carol?
So when I talk about my areas of magic, it's primarily really inquiring if my pieces of advice for as a CHRO is how connected is your strategy to the outputs that you're asking your employees to do. And that's just all about workforce planning. So my magic is make sure a CEO or a founder or an entrepreneur is asking, so are my strategies really aligned with the outputs that I'm asking? And have my strategies changed at all? And what do I have to change as far as my outputs? And then do I have the talent that I need for those outputs, right?
Yeah.
So that's like one of my pieces of magic that I try to give my CEOs, make their wheels start spinning.
Yeah. So, so I would think my first piece of advice is to recognize that as you step out into fractional work, you are an entrepreneur. This is different. This may be different than your career path has been so far, meaning you've probably worked for an organization and corporation in your role, and you've worked your way up to be in that position. And now you're going out to share fractions of that with other companies, usually at a smaller scale than the company you're coming out of that could hire you full-time. You're looking for spaces where they could use your work part-time. And so you are being entrepreneurial. You are creating opportunities. You are creating the relationships. You are creating the outcomes. So when you think about yourself as entrepreneurial, again, another lonely place as a founder, seek other fractionals to connect with and to commiserate with and to bounce ideas off of. That's where Jason and I met 15 years ago as entrepreneurs in a bit of a mastermind, saying, what are your struggles? Maybe I can help you. Here are my struggles. Maybe you can help me. And so finding a community as an entrepreneur is really important. It can be a hard space to be in. Certainly lonely, even if you're successful. The next, I think, piece is that being fractional is being more relational than your corporate job. You are likely working with an established team. You're likely working with an established team, but you're primarily supporting an owner, or in my case, a business owner, a founder, etc. And this is personal for them. This is the business that they've built and put a ton of energy into. And so what I love about being fractional and being invited into that seat is that, I've been that business owner, and I can come in and say, I want to care about this, not as much as you do, because that's impossible, but I want to act on this work in a caring way about your business and the outcomes, et cetera. So I think it's a much more relational type of work than being a CMO in an organization. Not to say, and I got to say that different, because I've never worked at the highest levels of corporate America. There is relationships, there are politics, there's all those sorts of things. This is more personal, I think. Last and third, as an entrepreneur now, I would say I usually try and start broad and figure out, like, of all those areas of magic that I like to do, I try and make those all available. But start defining what you want to spend more of your time doing so that you can find the right fit for those. So if you got 12, but you really, 3 of them you've done for 20 years and you'd really like to not do those, or if there's 5 of them that you've done some in that time but you want to do more of that, start figuring out what you want to lean towards and talk about that and focus. I think particularly the fractional CMO role, a lot of people put that title, but it's hard to cut through that and know what that means. And there's some people that are great at ad buying. There's some people that have lots of experience in social, or, like we just talked about, marketing is a lot of things to a lot of people. The more you can part of the reason I focused in on Fractional Creative Director is because I wanted to be in content creation and team, like working with creative teams to execute on content strategies. And so I want to cut through some of that conversation a little bit to content, to creation. And so, find out what you want, what kinds of stuff you want to do. And then I guess if I can ever give a bonus piece of advice, is sort of like identify what your limits are. How many I would say right now I've got a client where I'm about 5 hours a week, and that feels probably the low level of where I want to be with an organization to feel like I'm making enough progress and doing good work. So figure out where your kind of boundaries are and where you want to work, because again, when you're working with people who are hiring fractional, they want guidance on how to hire you. They want guidance on how to use you. And so if you can give them some structure around what does it look like when they work with you for 5 hours a week or 20 hours a month, right? What does it look like if they work with you for 60 hours a month, or whatever your structure is, so that they kind of know how to make those decisions and know how to rev up if they need to, or rev down if they need to. So just be prepared to educate or give guidance. It doesn't have to be the way I do it, may be different the way you do it, but the person you're working with needs some guidance in that, because this is all new.
I'd like the two of you to kind of better explain to our entrepreneurs and our founders and our CEOs the difference and the similarities between your role, Jason, as a fractional CMO, and your role, Eric, as a fractional creative director.
Well, I'll take a stab at that. Here's my perception, because Jason and I have plans to grab coffee and figure out those nuances. And I have, when I first jumped onto the Fractional United Slack channel, I particularly targeted CMOs to have conversations with, to find out where their area of expertise is and where they function, or, et cetera. So I think that there are tiers of any organization, right? There's a 10,000 foot view type of work, which kind of is a leadership type of work. There's 1,000 foot view that sort of gets plans together and figures out some of the details, et cetera. And then there is the ground level where you're doing the work and getting it done. And so that's whether that's HR or finance or whatever. And I think at the highest level, you sort of have vision and ideas of what you could create. And I would say probably Jason and I both play in that space, and can work with a founder or owner to say, hey, what is possible, and what is your dream? What do you want? What story you want to tell, et cetera. There's sort of then at that middle level stages of complexity in terms of how much you're doing and how technical that work is. So, Jason, I think you have more experience in the analytics behind and performance of campaigns. Having run a business that was a high B2C, where you need you had to fill that funnel, keep people coming in, you have more attrition, et cetera. Whereas I had a B2B, which was you still had to fill the funnel, but it was not nearly as it was. We got by with more organic and more networking and that sort of thing. So there is some technical side that I think Jason probably has more experience setting up the systems that track all of the marketing, the analytics and performance. I'm not, I like analytics and I like performance, but I think I tend to work at that step of executing the content, whereas Jason has more experience setting up the systems to be able to determine whether that content that was created is working at, a fine-tuned level. Like you can figure out those pieces. And I think, I guess I'll stop there and say, hey, is that a good differentiator between our experiences, or is there more that you would put in there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you did a great job. In fact, I don't need to say anything because you covered it all. It's really interesting. Yeah, I agree with your position on that. And every organization is different. I have one client, they have a creative director, and I'm their fractional CMO. And depending on the personalities and the background of those people, there's always a little bit of flex. So this creative director is much like you, Eric. He's in terms of imagery and graphic direction and how things are being laid out across all the channels, whether it's web or video. He is so strong. And I always say a CMO is, they're typically good with strategy. So stepping back and saying, we've got business strategy and we've got marketing strategy. And the CMO's job is to align that marketing and carry out that business strategy. Should be all consistent through the end. And it's interesting because Eric brought up analytics, right? And I just had this conversation this week. I have a client, they called me and said, Jason, we have this advanced actually, they said it's very easy analytics project, and they said, we want to take, we have a plugin that goes on the site of all of our clients, and we want to mine out the analytics data into a dashboard. And I paused them there. I said, it's interesting because everyone thinks if you're a CMO that you are the one going in to set up those technical systems. And that's really more of a marketing ops or even a CTO that would go in and do that. But everyone assumes, hey, you're a CMO, so you know marketing. Oh, you must also, Jason, we want you to help produce our brand video. And almost always I will pull in a creative director to help with that, because what I know, in my experience in my first business, we had a film crew come in once a month, did a whole day of filming, and I worked in Hollywood was my background. I can tell you this, there is so much that goes into executing at a high level. I think it's very easy to, TikTok and all the, Instagram platforms have made it look really easy. And of course you can always do informal content, but if you're really going to go deep with it, you're going to need someone that has navigated those areas that can advise you. So I think it's perfect scenario. I love working with creative directors because that tells me, company is going to dedicate the resources to really doing just a bang up job. Did we answer your question, Carol?
Yes, you did. And it just further shows that you can find people who might be a jack of all trades, but you're not going to get the quality of a master of one. And so this really plays into why hiring fractional executives is so beneficial to an organization. To think that I could hire you, Jason, to handle the funnel and all of those components of my marketing, and then I could hire Eric to do the creative and ensure that that's staying on time and task at the quality that I need. Because we all know Eric's going to be able to execute it quicker with his skill set than you would. So as a CEO, I'm ultimately going to end up paying you, Jason, more money, and I may not get the quality that I would have gotten from Eric, and vice versa. Eric could probably figure out funnels, but there's maybe a learning curve because Lord knows if you talk about Facebook funnels, they change every week. So there's always going to be, that learning curve. And so then I'd pay Eric more money to learn how to do it because I just wanted to work with one person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other benefit about finding those experts is because you're staying up to date on what is going on with your magic, so that you aren't falling behind and you're able to add that value immediately to your clients. So I appreciate the two of you kind of laying that out for our listenership, because I think all too often they're looking to hire one person or they end up going to that agency, right, Eric? And they're not integrated into the true culture and vision of what it is that you're doing.
Well, and I think to that point, I'm going to go back to my point about fractional being relational, is that in a world where you may have layers of fractional, and again, I'll down the pipeline working with freelancers and working with that team. If you want to be good and successful working fractionally, I think you've got to be able to work with a vast, like a myriad crew of people and get to know how to work together quickly. You've got to be a little flexible. You've got to be able to adapt in the new space that you're in. And especially if you're moving from, hey, I'm working in company A for, 10 hours and I'm going to switch over to company B for 20 hours and company C for 5 hours. Like that ability to flex and know who you're working with and how you're working with them. I think it's a really important to be able to focus on people and know how to work together.
Nice.
Love it.
Well, I want to thank you, Eric, for being a guest on our podcast. I think this is really going to be quite enlightening for the viewership because, as you had mentioned even at the get, not a lot of people out there being fractional creative directors, and how the two of you guys have kind of really given way more in-depth knowledge of where those benefits are between a CMO and a creative director helps the listeners make better decisions on how they're going to add the right expertise as part of their workforce planning at the right time to get the results that they're looking for.
I made the stumble that I think, that when people think CMO, they think, hey, you've got all the skills, and especially so marketing, there's a creative side and then there's a administrative side. Mm-hmm. There's my wife is not a creative at all, but she's run some of the best marketing teams ever. She ran marketing teams for TrueScribe, which was about tapping people to create stuff that could work into a calendar and a system and that would show us how it was performing and then adjusting. That is a non-creative kind of space to work in. Marketing is so big and broad. It takes all kinds.
Yeah,
it does. Yeah. It's, I don't get a chance to work. I have one client that has a creative director. I usually don't get that opportunity because usually companies will bring a CMO on and they just assume, you can do everything. I know, Carol, you get that because you work in HR and you probably educate people constantly, right? About like, hey, you're hiring for this position doesn't mean they can do A through Z.
Yeah. Well, and they try to do this, Frankenstein kind of roles, right? Where they're hoping that they can build a job description and then they're out there looking for unicorns. And it's just not possible to find that many unicorns out there. And I think the way that we are evolving and that fractional is really kind of coming into its own. It's helping organizations recognize I'd rather spend the money for a part-time expert, not a freelancer, because a freelancer's project, right? But if you're trying to create a whole vision, a theme, a feel over multiple kinds of programs or products, you need somebody who's embedded, right? Because every time you bring somebody on that's a freelancer, yeah, you're getting their expertise, but it's very myopic. And I think that as we continue to talk to, from an HR side of it, as we continue to talk to these CEOs and say, I hear what you want. In a full-time person, when that role is big enough, then yeah, that makes sense. But to bring somebody on, and it's just kind of the analogy that I said, why would I pay Jason to do creative work? And it's going to take him longer. It's like, why am I bringing on a full-time person for 40 hours that they do fit 60%, but I haven't invested in any learning and development to teach them the other 40%.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell them to go learn it on their own at best, right? And it's really not going to be at the quality that I wanted from an output. It's like I'm willing to give a little and teach a little, but ultimately I may have to run out of time, like you talked about. It's trying to stay on with timelines.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that my dad is been fractional is a new word, but an HR consultant for I think over 30 years, and has a business where he's got 15 team members, some part-time, full-time, that are HR consultants. He's the example I was using. He's one of my clients, which I didn't want to say is my dad.
That's good.
He's got to sell this business in 3 years, and so I've got to help him grow the business so that he can do that. And so one of the things that we're looking at is there's sort of the projects, there's sort of the simmering level of HR of like, hey, I've just got random HR stuff to do every month, and I need somebody who can do those things. But then there's sort of the growing a department that happens, right? You're starting with an organization where they have probably none of the strategic level planning on this department, and you're sort of like saying, well, what's the foundation of that? Because we got to do something. We got to create a foundation as a fractional, you got to create a foundation to work on. It's not enough to just do one-off projects all the time. Hey, I just want to, be a on-call freelancer, like you said. I want to build systems. I want to build stuff, et cetera. And so I wonder, it's interesting because I hadn't thought about the idea that there are fractionals out there who say, hey, I want to do this, this, and this, and I want to be part-time. And so I'm going to try and find a company that fits that. Because I come from, coming from the entrepreneurial space, I'm like, okay, I provide services and I need to find somebody who wants some of those services. And then how do we work together will be unique to that organization. So, but I think some of that's probably, again, I mentioned it a little bit and I don't want to overstep this or be negative on this, like coming out of a corporate space, I can see you're looking for a job description of you're trying to design a job description and find a company that fits that job description, or 3 companies that fit that job description, which may not work because I think as an entrepreneur, you need to find work in a lot of different ways. And it's going to be different depending on who you work with. It's going to be a little bit different. And so, I did tell them that they need to be flexible. So, I did my job.
What's interesting too is when you start to get into the financials, and for a startup, for example, what does a startup need? It needs revenue, it needs growth, right? And let's say you're gonna, I think the decision a lot of times is, what C-level exec do I bring on first? Okay, who do I hire next full time? You start adding up those salaries and that overhead, and it's not always, many times not effective because you're just cruising through cash. And so, yeah, the fractional is beautiful because you can bring on each fractional one at a time, or sometimes even more than one at a time at a lower price point. Get what you need in the moment that you need it, and then, like Carol said, you can then jump to full time if you decide that's going to be a better fit. So,
yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Like I could imagine, especially startups or small businesses where they have multiple fractions as their first level of management, like as an alternative to like part-time building a team, building a department, but also managing maybe the individual contributors that were their first hires, right? depending on the type of work it is, et cetera. But also wondering what it'll be like to have, because the other thing about being an entrepreneur is that you're taking on the risk, right? You're taking on the risk of doing the work and being available and filling your time with other stuff and finding, like you're doing marketing, you're doing sales, you're doing all this other stuff. I'm not doing any job applications. Part of the reason I love being fractional is because I don't like the job application process. It's not an area, I don't know how to translate my experience very well on a piece of paper to the jobs that I've applied for in the past. And so, but what I love is being able to talk to somebody, see what their pain is, and give them an idea of what I could do to alleviate that pain, and that be enough for us to move forward together.
Yeah.
Right.
When you talked about the relationship component, I think that was really eloquent. I think that it's recognizing that you're both entrepreneurs, right? So you're not only creating that community and that opportunity to grow with each other. It's the with, right? It's that relationship. And I think that's most of the fractional executives are looking for small to mid-sized businesses where they can have a relationship, because they were in the big companies and it got impersonal and it got robotic. And, these people who are back then, maybe they started when it was creative and energetic and it just grew, right? Or they were like, out of college, I went to McKinsey. And then I decided that I became a number and I was in the bottom 10% and I got laid off, right? I wasn't revenue generating for whatever reason, but they've got so many skills that can parlay and help out the smaller business.
Yeah. Well, and I would say, like, even when I'm working with, when I'm working at a higher hour, working more hours at one of these fractional, like one of my clients, it is certainly not the same level of stress. I'm sure it depends on the person you're working with, right? Because there's certainly some business owners where if hiring a fractional is still kind of pushing their budget, they might be real on top of, like, what's my ROI on this? What am I getting out of this? What are you working on? That sort of stuff. And I've had the luxury of having a couple of clients where that's not the case, that we're in a comfortable space for them, and they enjoy they are seeing the fruits of it. But yeah, it is a different pace working with small businesses than it is with corporations. And there is a lot of value. Like you won't use everything that you've used in corporate in this space. So by definition, like, you can kind of, you don't have to have all of the same things floating in your head and worrying about that you would in a corporate space. You talk about marketing can be all of those different things. In a small business, they're starting with a few of those things. And I think that's part of the reason why I am putting myself in the creative director space, because that automatically takes me out of, like, AdWords and, out of some of the things in marketing that are completely valid, but isn't what I do or want to do. And so I can find alignment with an organization that wants to do marketing and wants to lean towards content instead of towards ad. Again, not that one is better than the other, but that's just their bent. That's their preference.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, Jason, do you want to thank him and give him all the accolades and tell everybody what to do?
Yeah. Eric, thanks so much for joining us. If you want to find Eric online, again, he's at Relumed, Relumed. Did I spell that right?
Yep.
Relumed.com. Okay. And thanks for tuning in. You can find us on LinkedIn, the Fractional Edge podcast, and YouTube, and soon to come a bunch of other channels. So I want to thank you for tuning in. Tune in again for the next episode, which is going to continue the conversation, but with another fractional executive. All right, Eric, take care.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to the Fractional Edge. We hope you enjoyed our insightful discussions and feel inspired to unleash your competitive edge.
Remember to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with the latest episodes. You can also connect with our podcast guests to benefit from their expertise and explore collaboration opportunities by visiting our website, thefractionaledge.com. Join us next time as we continue to explore the power of workforce planning and fractional executives in today's competitive business landscape. Until then, take care and keep growing.